welcome to Adapt with Danette FM. I'm Danette FM and I am a executive coach, a speaker, an author, and also a trainer, and I've run businesses for over 25 years. Super excited to have you here today, and I want to welcome into our conversation Jez FM, our producer. Welcome, Jez.
Thank you so much, Danette. Pleasure to be here, as always. And thank you to everybody that's been listening and sharing. The numbers have been growing exponentially. So please go check out the YouTube as well. That's where the numbers are really doing some good stuff. It's because we've got great video content there, and we highly recommend people checking that out. So, Danette, you're not only those things that you've mentioned before, you're also the co-founder and director of learning of Magical Learning, which has been running for over 25 years as a training and facilitation company specializing in leadership, finance, and actually making learning enjoyable. At Magical Learning, we've worked with massive industry leaders like Coles, Westpac, and the Australian government, to name just a few, and have also partnered with global industry leaders like Robin Sharma and John Mattone. So it's exciting for people to come here, to learn, to adapt. We've got a lot of experience, we've worked with a lot of people, and we've got a lot of insight. So, Danette, pleasure to be here. Well, Danette, I think we've got to dive into our first segment here, and that is, of course, Adapt the News. Alrighty, Danette, this is Adapt the News. Now, Adapt the News is where we use your adaptable insights. As an adaptability expert, we use your insights here, and we're going to use them on this news story that I've selected. So I've found a really interesting one this week, and here's the headline. It's from CNN Business, and headline is, Apple's new AirPods are also hearing aids. Can they really save you thousands of dollars? Now, what this is about is that the new AirPods that are being produced by Apple can double, in some instances, as hearing aids, which for the price of $249 is significantly cheaper and more accessible to people that suffer from hearing loss. Now, this is very fascinating because it's typically we think of these things as being for, the typical consumer, and this is a new feature. So, Danette, looking at this story, what does this bring up for you?
So I love this story because this is an example of where Apple were already making the AirPods and they've gone, what else? What else could we use these for that would help our customers? And in the conversation that we're going to be listening to after this with Simi, she talked about an example of Amazon, and Amazon in their meetings, and I had not heard this before, but I love it, have a chair which no one sits in, and that chair is to represent the customer. And so when they're making decisions, they're always thinking about, what about the customer? How is this going to help the customer? So I love that Apple went, you know what, people are going to use our AirPods anyway. How else could we help people? And here they've looked at, you know what, they're in their ears anyway. That's what hearing aids do. And there's a lot of people that have hearing aid challenges, myself included. And so unless it's really severe, these are actually, the FDA have approved them in the States to be hearing aids. So what a wonderful, refreshing way of helping people to be able to hear more, which makes them feel more included as well. So I loved it because it's a really good way of adapting a product to actually help your consumers more. So I think it's a brilliant example, Jez. What about you? What were your insights?
Well, what I like about this one is that Apple has seen a hole in the market here. So this isn't just to help people. This is because they think they can make money doing this. And it's very sensible. How can they make the cost for people's hearing aids lower? How can they sell more product? And these two things fit together. So what they're doing is by increasing accessibility, they're going to increase market share, because people that previously couldn't even use AirPods because they would have to use a hearing aid, those two things are incompatible with each other. This now gives those people much more access, not only to everyday life, but then they can also listen to music, which is, could be very new for a lot of people, especially at an accessibility level. So I think this is a really smart way to do a bit of a good news story, but also potentially make a bit of cash. And so I think that Apple must be very happy with this innovation. And to the people at Apple that had the foresight to think about this, great job.
Yes.
Well, Danette, that's a great Adapt the News. And for people that are listening, if you want to send in news stories, you can always write into adaptwithdanette@gmail.com, or you can comment on our YouTube videos and we will see those. And there may be a future episode that we can have a look at and discuss a story. All right, so Danette, before we get into today's conversation, which is kind of the main course of the podcast, let's give people a little bit of a teaser of kind of what it's about. So you were chatting to Simi today, who has an amazing energy, and Simi had some great insights. But what were some of your bigger, little info nuggets that you want people to keep an eye out for heading into this conversation?
So Simi has a business psychology background. She's worked both here and in the UK. What I loved around her insights around collaboration, particularly, were that it's really important for us to understand ourselves. So to take that time to really get to know what's my style when I'm collaborating, what's my approach, etc. So you can work with others and understand their approach as well, and come up with something really good. And I really loved, and let me just find it in my things, she had a lovely model called the 3 E's. And this was around poor collaboration. And what I love, the 3 E's stand for what makes collaboration not great. First one is ego, because your ego wants you to be right and therefore is not open to listening to others. Second one is your energy. And later on this week, I'm actually interviewing Simi for her new book, which is coming out on the 25th of September. Very excited for Simi. And the energy one is definitely covered in her new book. And the third one is echo chamber. And the echo chamber is, are you just hearing the same voices over and over again and not bringing in those different voices, which is where we get those beautiful different perspectives from a collaboration perspective. So they're two of mine. What about you, Jez, before we go in? I've got some for the tail as well.
Yes, well, I mean, for me, the big one is what is in the title of this podcast, which is about the power of quiet people. And why that is a resource you have to be you have to manage yourself and you have to sort of cultivate. But if you do it, you're going to end up with a lot better results.
Yes.
Well, without further ado, Danette, let's not leave the audience waiting any longer. Here is your conversation with Simi Rayat.
Hello and welcome to the Adapt with Danette FM podcast series. We're on series 2, which is about collaboration and problem solving. I'm Danette Fenton-Menzies and my guest today is Simi Rayat. And Simi is a dear friend, but I'm going to get Simi to introduce herself. And today we're going to concentrate on collaboration. So Simi, over to you. Welcome. And let's let our listeners and our viewers know a little bit about you.
Oh, thank you, Danette. It's always such a pleasure to be in your company, to speak with you, and the time that we have together. So thank you for inviting me to join today. I work as a business psychologist. I've been doing that for the last 20 years, working with clients, organizations, leaders and managers in the UK and now here in Australia and this side of the world. My role really is to help leaders and managers be a joy to work for and do business with. So that's my core aim.
Awesome.
And my mission is really to help as many leaders and managers create cultures that are not only productive and high performing, but are also thriving in terms of well-being and brings joy in those that work in those cultures and those that experience that culture too.
Oh, how delightful. And do we want to let our listeners and our viewers in on something that is going to be released shortly?
I would love to, Danette. Thank you so much for that. So I'm super excited. I've been working on my book called Productivity Joy for the last 4 years. It's a book that I've developed that shares a formula that helps busy professionals be effective, feel energized in 5 minutes a day.
How delightful. Oh, can't wait for that to come out. And Simi, we'll have you back on the Magical Learning podcast when that comes out too, so we can talk more about that one.
Would love to, Danette. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, well, let's dig into our questions. So our first question is, what have you seen or experienced that helps you with collaboration?
I think one of the key things that I feel is really helpful is to, one, deeply know yourself. If you want to collaborate with others, self-awareness is really, really key. Because quite often when we're working with others, you've got different personalities, different approaches, different styles. If you're not really clear on what your style is, it's really hard to understand other people's and pick up on those cues.
Yes.
So I think that self-awareness, knowing yourself during kind of a normal play, I call kind of everyday, how we show up every day and how people experience you on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
As well as the times, Danette, when we're under stress and high pressure, different personality characteristics and qualities pop up.
Yes.
And we need to be aware of those as well, because at the end of the day, when we're collaborating, it's so important to be able to manage those and be aware of those so you can work better alongside other people.
Oh, I love that answer. And you know, I know there's a stat that is around like about 95% of people think they're self-aware, and it's really about 10 to 15% of people are self-aware. So
Correct.
when we're building that self-awareness, are there any elements there that could help people with collaboration in terms of their self-awareness?
Yeah, look, I think one is getting to know what is your style?
Mm,
Are you someone that, really likes to jump in quickly and get on with a task? Getting in and just starting and making progress? Or are you a planner? Are you someone that likes to take that time to pause, reflect, and really plan ahead? So really get to know what is your style, what is your approach? I think asking the questions of yourself in terms of, for me to be successful, to work with this team and with these individuals, what do I need? What do they need to be aware of about me? And what do
mm,
I need to find out about them?
love
I think
that.
that's really key.
Yep, yep, love that. And just, leading with those questions to be able to explore not only yourself but others is great way of doing that. Oh, love that. All right, well, let's go to the opposite of that, which is share an example of poor collaboration. You don't need to name the organization or anything, but also then once you've shared that example, what were the impacts that poor collaboration ended up having?
Yeah, look, I can think of many examples, Danette, because I think, as you know, many organizations, individuals, we try hard and we want to get good results, but quite often the execution is where the kind of misunderstandings or misalignment happens.
Yeah.
So I would say there's three key things that I've seen when collaboration doesn't go as well as planned. And those would be ego. So when
Yes.
our ego gets in the way, I'm going to call them the three E's, okay? So ego is
Lovely.
the first one. The second one is energy.
Mm.
And this is, I talk a lot and I mention it, I really talk about it in the book, Productive is Joy, but we all need to be aware of our emotional temperature, because our emotional temperature sets the vibe of our energy.
Yep.
And as you know, people will, kind of sniff out your energy before you even open your mouth and start speaking. And the energy that we bring really plays a role in terms of how people kind of warm to us, listen to us, want to engage with us.
Mm.
So energy, ego. I didn't go into ego, but I think ego is a really important one, because ego is really very much about, when we think that we need to be right, when we think that we've got a point to prove, we think that our ideas are better than others, that's when collaboration goes wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the third E would be, I refer to it as the echo chamber. So, you'll know this is that if you're hearing the same few voices again and again, that's when collaboration again falls down, because you've got people who then feel disempowered, disengaged, and you're missing out on probably really good intel, insights, experience, lived experience, problem solving, innovation. So I think those are the key three things. And I think also with the echo chamber, as humans, we all have a confirmation bias.
Mm.
So we're always looking for things that confirm what we believe. And when we go into that spiral, it's very difficult then to think outside the box, to
Yep.
let other people challenge us.
Yes.
And that's when that echo chamber can become really troublesome for the project, the organization, but also for the people that you're working with,
Yeah.
and you as the leader and the manager.
Yep. Oh, I love that answer. And I love the three E's. I can see also how they're so interconnected, because the ego has a particular energy, doesn't it? Which is,
Yeah,
it's a more forceful, as you were saying, I've got to be right type thing,
yeah.
which then tends to make the voices in the echo chamber are going to be the ones where if you've got ego and you're the leader, you're going to have a few others that are trying to prove as well. So yeah, not fun.
Not fun. And I think at the end of the day, people don't want to be pushed,
Yes.
and I think that's, speaking to your point around that energy and the force.
Yep.
If people are pushed, um, you carry them or you push them very, in a very kind of forceful way, they will
Mm.
do it, but
Yes.
will you really get the best out of them? No. Will they check out? Probably, yes,
Yep.
and they'll look for the next opportunity. But whereas if we can pull people along and they willingly want to work with you and they feel seen, heard, recognized, and valued in your presence,
Yep.
you're going to get the best out of them.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, oh, I love that. Oh, all right, next question, which is based on your experience. What tips do you have for others? And this next bit was included by Jez, which is including young people, because there'll be people starting out, there'll be people who are in mid-career and towards the end of their career who really want to start to develop these collaboration skills, but maybe they've not really been exposed to it. So what sort of tips do you have based on your experience?
Yeah, what a great question.
Mm.
And what I think is really important to remember here is that even if you're an experienced leader or manager, or you're at your start of your journey, we're all learning. This is, something that we all continually develop, we grow. And I always say that, the more that we can learn about ourselves, and that journey is continual as we go through different phases, different experiences in our life, different roles, different positions, the more insight and intel that we have, we're then able to adapt
Yes.
and flex our style. And I'm not saying flex it so much to the extent that you lose who you are. No, this is about just slight moderation, slight flex, so that people around you who you're working with, who will also have different styles, be on their different journey, can actually meet you and you can meet them where they're at. And that's the
Nice.
key point.
Yep.
So, in terms of tips, I would say one is get to know yourself in terms of what are your strengths. I define a strength as something that, one, you're good at, but two, when you use that strength, you also feel energized.
Nice.
It brings you joy.
Yes.
So, get clear on what your strengths are. Be really curious. Ask questions.
Nice.
If how are we going to learn if we're not asking questions, if we're not being inquisitive? So
Yep.
really put yourself out there and ask questions. And the third thing I would say is, if you've got an opinion, you've got an idea, make yourself heard. And I know sometimes when you're a junior person in the team, or perhaps haven't got as much experience, it's still worth suggesting your idea, coming forward, because it's a fresh outlook. And I can guarantee you that other people in the team or around you will not have described your idea or suggestion in your words and
Mm.
from your lived experience. And
Yeah.
I think in that way, we all have a um, unique opportunity and a unique way to experience and share. And the more we can do that, the better it is, because our voice gets heard. At the
Yes.
same time, if there's other people who you can see are really quiet or holding back, see how you can bring them in. Practice that opportunity to say, I'd love to hear what you think. What's your perspective? Has your experience been similar to mine, or is it different?
Mm. Oh, I love that. And just that whole, which is totally collaboration, about hearing those divergent views, those different views, but also the quieter views, because I know in some collaboration, and a couple of other people have shared, where the poor example is the loudest voices win versus being able to hear everyone. So I love that also, be brave enough to share your own, but also try
Yeah.
to bring in the quieter ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we are missing out on.
Yes.
And sometimes the quieter ones just need that extra encouragement.
Yeah.
They may also just be reflectors. They may just wish to have that time to think and ponder and come back at a later stage.
Yep.
So my recommendation would be, even if it's not there and then, check in with the person, even if it's a couple of days after, to seek their opinions, ideas, and just their thoughts and reflections.
Love that. Oh, love that example. All right. So let's talk about what's your favorite example of collaboration and why?
I love this. So, look, I always come back to this example because I think collaboration is really, really important in the sense that if we think about it, we need to be thinking about different people's perspectives.
Yes.
And Amazon do this really, really well. When they run any meeting, they always have a spare seat in their room.
I didn't
And
know
that's,
this.
yeah, their spare seat in their room is for the customer.
Ah, I love that. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a great prompt and great reminder that when we're thinking about ideas and solution generation, all of these things, we've got to think about who is the end user. Why are we doing this? What is the benefit? How is it going to impact them? And to have, that spare seat in the room of your end user is a great way to prime the team
Yes.
to remind us why we're doing this and what do we need to be thinking about here and how is it going to impact the end user. So I would say that if we can look at ways in which we can remind ourselves by that simple example of having a spare seat, the customer seat in our meetings, could be a really great way to help us collaborate in a way that's with purpose
Yes.
and with a real aim and mission to get to a really good outcome.
Love that. I'm going to bring that into our meeting next Monday. We've already had it today, but I will make sure. I
Amazing.
just think that's such a brilliant
It
idea.
is, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've used it a lot with a lot of my clients as well, Danette, and I feel it's such a physical reminder that we can't then ignore it,
Yes.
especially when we get so bogged down in everything else we're trying to do and the meeting's overrunning. But if we've got that physical reminder, it can really help prime everybody.
And I love that it's a physical thing and it's the chair, but it's then space, and that space is to
Yeah.
explore different perspectives. And so I just love that idea. Well, thank you for introducing that one. Never heard that one before. All right, we're nearly at the end of this. I'm having so much fun, Simi. So
Same.
I would love to know, is there anything else you'd like to share, including any helpful resources that our listeners and or viewers might find helpful around collaboration?
Yeah, look, I would love, for your viewers, feel free to go onto my website, www.simirayat.com. And on there, we've got a resources page. We share a few, podcast episodes that talk about leadership, elevating your leadership impact. We've
Nice.
got the book coming out, Productivity Joy, which will be released internationally on the 25th of September. And in that book, Danette, I shared the 5 Qs formula.
Yep.
And the 5 Qs formula is essentially, it's a proven science-backed formula that, you ask yourself these 5 key questions at the start of your day, every day.
Oh, can't
And
wait.
what it helps you do is it really helps you master what is important for you in that day.
Yes.
It helps you magnify your joy, and ultimately it helps you be 5% more awesome each and every
Mm,
day.
love that. And how good would that be to show up like that when being part of collaboration? Oh,
I agree. And whether that's at work or even at home,
yes.
I think
Yep.
the ripple effect that it has, and this is why I'm so excited about my mission to help, 5 million busy professionals globally move from surviving to thriving, because the stats and the research shows that 82% of, the population of busy professionals are really feeling burnout, stressed, overwhelmed. And it costs Australian economy up to $60 billion
Ouch.
a year in lost productivity.
That's just below the health budget federally.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And, even more than that, I feel it personally robs us of our joy, our daily joy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is why I'm so
love it.
passionate about it, because at the end of the day, if we can take personal responsibility for how we show up, what we want to achieve, it has a positive ripple effect on everybody else that we interact with.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Can't wait to have that conversation. Can't wait to see the book too. Very excited for that.
Thank you.
Simi, we're just about at the end. Was there anything else you wanted to share with our listeners and viewers before we finish up for today?
Look, I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you, Danette. It always is. I love our conversations. I think when we get collaboration right, it is just magical. The outcomes and the benefits that it can have is just absolutely incredible. But working collaboratively takes effort, and it takes intentional effort.
Yeah.
So the more we can be intentional about how we collaborate, how we show up, how we engage and interact in a way that is a win-win for everyone involved, I think that's when we really get true collaboration. It's not about you or I, it's really about us together. And together, I think this is how we can all not just elevate our organizations, but we can actually elevate humanity together.
Oh, I love that. Love that deeper purpose too. That's beautiful. You're on my mission with me too, Simi. That's exactly what I love too. Well, can I say thank you so much for joining us and sharing with our listeners and our viewers on the Adapt podcast, and sending you, as always, a big hug.
Thank you, Danette. I always love your hugs.
Thank you.
Soon.
Well, Danette, what a great conversation with Simi. This is my first time actually listening to Simi, and what a lovely person with great insights. This was a really good conversation. Before we jump into sort of our listener question, this was a good conversation. I had a bunch of takeaways. Did you have any key takeaways from this convo with Simi?
My big one, and it came right at the end of the conversation, was about being really intentional around collaboration, because I spoke earlier about the Amazon and the empty chair example, but I really like that intentionality, because if we're not intentional, we're probably not going to plan and focus as much to get the really good results, like, including the quieter voices in the conversation. I also loved how she talked about not everyone is going to be able to give you answers straight away. So some people will need to go and reflect, and circling back to them and chatting to them a couple of days later and sort of checking in on their insights can be really helpful too. So they were a couple of mine. What about yours, Ches?
Yeah. I mean, I thought there was a couple of really interesting things. One was that we are all different people, depending on our mood and our health, and there's so many different factors. We show up as different people all the time, so you can't. And I think for many people, it's about managing those, which she made a good point about. So it's not other people's responsibility if you're angry. It's your responsibility.
Totally.
So you have to be the one that can even acknowledge that that's happening, and then be the person there to say, actually, we need to slow this down. I really liked this insight, which is that if you push people, they do the work, but you don't get the best out of them, and they may just move on. Yes. So, I think for a lot of managers, there may be KPIs that they have to hit, and sometimes those can sort of verge on the unrealistic, which causes people to push people. But what that could mean in the long term is that you're going to have to do a lot of hiring and rehiring, because people are just not going to accept it. And so you have to think of that stuff. And again, this comes back to listening to the quiet people, which was my insight before the chat, because sometimes those people also have good insights, but just they may be afraid to speak up. And just because people aren't speaking up doesn't mean they don't have insights. It means that the environment may be scary and they don't want to get involved.
Yes. Yeah. So that whole thing of safety, is super important. Yeah, love that, Jez.
Alrighty, Danette. Well, you know what time it is. It's time for us to check in with our listeners and see what they're asking in our mailbag segment we call Ask and Adapt. All right, Danette, are you ready for this week's write-in? Fantastic. So this one's from Alex. And Alex has written, "Hey, Danette, loved your episode with Dr. Richard Hodge. I feel like I'm on the wrong path career-wise in life. I'm currently working as an engineer, but I don't think it's making me fulfilled. The only problem is that I'm not sure what else I want to do. I want to have more time off and impact on people's lives, but I'm not sure where to start. Thank you, Alex."
Great question, Alex. And I would start with one of the things I love to do, and I definitely talk about this when I'm coaching, is it's about experimenting. So a lot of people think, I should just know what I want to do. And realistically, we're going to have multiple careers in our lifetime. So it's leaning into what are the things that I enjoy. And so I love the word experiment. And we can experiment in a heap of different ways. Firstly, you could reflect. And Alex, you could think back to when you were a kid. And what gave you joy? What did you play with that, hours would pass by in minutes and you just go, that was such a fun day? Because I think as we become adults, we start to get really serious and we think that having fun and being playful isn't part of being an adult, but actually being really effective with our brain, the more joy and fun we can have with things, the better. So I suspect possibly your role at the moment, there's a bit of fun missing and a bit of joy around what you do. So have a think back and reflect on what you used to do when you were a kid that was fun for you. The other thing I think that can be really helpful, so a lot of people just go, I want to quit my job. And I'm like, well, if you have to pay rent and stuff like that, that may not be realistic. So thinking about, is there some volunteering you could try that was outside of work? Or maybe your workplace allows you to do some volunteering. That'd be even smarter. And you go and try a couple of different things just to see, again, what you enjoy doing. Is it more task-based? Is it more people-based? Is it a combination of those? Because I was really curious. You talked about that impact on people's lives. So I think that is a key driver for you to concentrate on. Whatever it is, it's got to have that impact and relating your purpose to that particular thing. I also love when I'm coaching, when people are really stuck, I go, if I gave you a magic wand and you waved it and you could do anything you want, what would that look like, feel like, sound like? And the idea is to open up the possibilities of different things you could do. And there's quite likely you could use some of your engineering skills and there is something else that could be helpful. And to share a story around that, many years I coached a group of unemployed people, and one of them, his love was photography and skateboarding. And he was like, I can't make money out of either of those. And I'm like, well, there's lots of professional photographers. So he went and started joining and doing some photography competitions and actually started winning. And his local council wanted to build a skate park. And I said, well, do you think you could maybe work with the council to design a skate park that actually worked for the youth of the town? And so he ended up doing that as well. So he got a job that paid him to do both. So when your brain goes, but people don't pay you to do those things, don't let your brain convince you that is true, because often there is a role there. And sometimes it's worth potentially taking a pay cut to go into a job that gives you more fulfillment. A lot of people get really hung up, I need more money, and therefore they block out a lot of options. Maybe to start with, it might be something that's a little bit of a pay cut and it gives you more joy, and that ultimately makes for a richer life. So they're just some of my ideas, Jess. And thanks, Alex. Great question.
Yes, Danette, and I thought you had some really good insights there. To be honest, I think that this is a great first start, and in my opinion, if you already have this insight, you already know which direction you kind of want to head. And you're right, it may involve a pay cut, but if it's about making your life, which you only get one of, a little bit better, and you have your own passion. I mean, the world's always changing. Just for an example, in myself, I am a podcast producer here, but this has become more of a video podcast, which luckily for us, I already was doing animation, prior to this. I was already doing video editing. So it's just ended up folding into my new job in a new way. So perhaps engineering, all these industries are changing. AI is coming in and it's being a bit of a disruptor. How can you now reuse this engineering in a way that's going to allow you, if you still want to do that, allow you to help people, allow you to have fun, and maybe do your own thing. So I would just say, don't be restricted by what has already been in terms of career, because things change really quickly. This video podcasting thing's changed in the last 6 months. This platform has changed in the last 2 weeks. So things are always changing. And I think as long as you keep your eyes open to what you could want to do, you'll be surprised at how often you can bring in other expertise into new areas.
Love that, Jez.
All right. Well, Danette, we're almost at the end of the podcast here today. We've absolutely smashed through this one. So great job. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to leave our listeners with today?
And I'm going to come back to where I was talking with Alex around experimenting. So, today we focused on collaboration with Simi. And I think that part of good collaboration, part of just learning to adapt to the changing environment is learning to experiment and knowing that sometimes you're going to fail, and actually failure is often where you learn your best lessons. I was reading earlier this week, it was from Dr. Benjamin Hardy, one of his books called Be Your Future Self Now. And he talked about we can have the best ideas in the world, and until we get into the arena and really test them, so get out into real life and test them, you're only theoretically knowing stuff. Once you hit the ground and start doing them, you get a lot of lessons, and a lot of those lessons you're going to go, oh, I didn't think of that. And so I love the idea of just seeing it as an experiment and trying different things. Some will work, and that's great, and some won't, and that's going to be your best learning. So I love that, and collaboration is absolutely, because we're working with different people, a great environment to experiment and learn in.
Well, thank you so much, Danette. What a great episode. Great to hear from Simi. And did you have anything you wanted to leave the listeners with?
Yes, everyone have a great week, and as always, stay adaptable.